Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight titled Beyond Screen Time, the Digital Technology in the Early Years. My name's Melissa and I'm from the Raising Children Network, and I'm joined here tonight with Professor Susie Edwards, who is our presenter on this topic. So in today's webinar we'll be talking about how you can help your child make the most out of using digital technologies. And I just want to take a bit of time to explain how tonight will work. So this webinar will have Susie present for about 40 minutes, and then after that we'll have a little bit of time during, Susie's presentation, and as well as at the end of the presentation for you to ask any questions that you have. And if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to add them into the chat box, which you should see on your screen. I just also want to let you know that this webinar is recorded and you'll be given a link to that next week. So before we get into it, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping just so that you can get the best experience out of this webinar. And in front of you, I hope that you can see a video screen, of which you can see Susie and I. And at times during this webinar, we'll be switching that view to a full presentation mode where you will just see the slides. So at the moment, I think you will see the video and the slides next to each other, but sometimes we'll just have the slides only so that you can focus on them and still have a chance to listen to Susie at the same time. As well as that, you should also see a chat box on your screen, and in that chat box you can leave your comments, ask questions anytime during the presentation, and we'll be checking that as we go along, just to keep an eye on if anyone's having any technical issues, or if any questions come up, we might have a moment and address them as well at that time. We also have Kim, who you've probably met in the chat box, and she'll be helping anyone with any, technical issues or any other issues that pop up during the course of this webinar. Now, I know some of you might be watching from your laptop or computer, and some of you might be actually using your smartphone or your tablet. I just want to let you know that if you use your laptop or computer, you'll get the best experience out of this webinar. But if you use your smartphone or your tablet, there might be some limitations in what you can see or do. For example, there'll be a few polls that we'll be doing tonight, and hopefully these polls will work just fine for you. But if you have a few problems, do pop that in the chat box, but it might be because you're using a smartphone or tablet. But let's see how we go. Now, if you do need to leave the webinar early, that's perfectly fine. But we'd really appreciate it if you took the time to fill out our survey, and you'll find a link for that survey in the chat box as well. Your responses will help us improve these webinars so that you can get the best experiences out of them. And just before we get into it again, I just want to take the time to mention that these webinars have been brought to you by the Department of Education and Training, and we would like to acknowledge their contribution to this set of webinars that allow you to hear and interact with experts on a wide range of topics important for parenting, and all for free. So that's fantastic. As well as that, I want to also acknowledge the Aboriginal owners of the land that we are on today. And I know that we're all attending from different areas, but here in Melbourne, the traditional owners are the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. So, in terms of what do you think that you'll get out of this webinar, let me just bring that up. We hope that at this webinar you'll be able to have a better idea of what technology means, how it's changing, in what ways is digital part of your child's world, and what should you be thinking about when it comes to your child's use of digital technologies, and what does current research say about children's overuse of technology. Now, at any time within this presentation, if you are concerned or upset, we just want to let you know that there's lots of information that you can access. For example, you could go to the Raising Children Network website, and there's a lot of information there that you might be able to find that could help you. There's always parent line in your state, and do feel free to call them if there's something that's concerning you throughout this. There's also Lifeline, and the number, you should be able to see that on your screen as well. And the Raising Children Network also has a page that has specific hotlines. So if you have a particular concern, you could always go there as well. We'll try to address as many questions as we can throughout this webinar, but with time restrictions and what we're here to do today, we might not be able to get through everything. So sorry about that. Let's see. So I guess we've got to the part of this presentation where I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Susie Edwards to you tonight. She is our expert on expert in play-based learning in an early childhood education setting, and she's also the director of the Early Childhood Futures Research Program at the Australian Catholic University. Susie co-chairs the Early Childhood Australia Digital Policy Group, where she is developing a statement on young children and digital technology. So Susie's a real great person to have here tonight because she's really all across the country thinking about the use of digital technology and young children. And so I'm looking forward to getting a lot of advice from you tonight as well. So please start us off.
Thank you so much. Now let's just get these slides up. There we go. So welcome everybody, and thank you for the introduction. I'm really impressed that you've made it this evening and logged in, and I hope you've managed to get through your evening with the children and the dinner and the bars and getting everyone settled. My sort of background in early childhood education is initially as an early childhood educator, a kindergarten teacher. And then I moved into researching children's play, and in the last sort of 8 to 10 years I've been quite interested in young children's uses of digital technologies, and had a sort of have some real personal experiences with digital technologies in families as well. So my husband and I, we have 4 children. We have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And what's been really interesting in our parenting experience and family experience is sort of the differences in family dynamics around digital technologies, particularly since the iPhone came out in 2007 and iPad in 2010. So our first 2 children were sort of pre-touch screens, and our last 2 children are post-touchscreen babies. So we'll open up this evening. I know that when you registered for the webinar, you did put down what you're hoping to learn, and it's really interesting to hear how many of those questions around screen time. And this presentation is actually called Beyond Screen Time. So when we get to the end of the webinar, it'll be good to hear what you're thinking about digital technologies. But if you could just pop in the chat box there so that we can get a collective sense of where everyone's at in their thinking about what do you hope to learn this evening. So we can sort of start just popping some of those thoughts into the chat box there. That would be really, really useful. So while we're starting to get your comments come up about what you're hoping to learn this evening, we'll start with this first slide, and I'm just going to switch the screen now so that you won't see Mel and I for a little while, and you'll just see the slides. And the reason for that is it just makes the streaming of the content a little bit more stable. But we will come back later on so that we can touch base with you, because it's also really nice to have the face too. So just bear with me while I click that, and I don't know which one's which. That left or right? That one. Left. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so we've got your comments coming up. How much screen time, how, when, how to introduce it, what's better. So lots around this whole issue of screen time. So I'm really hoping to engage with that tonight. I love that one, how to get children off screen time happily. I haven't been very successful at that as a mother. Okay, so first of all, just very briefly, what is digital technology? So one of the things that's really important to remember is people have always created digital technologies. So technologies have been around for a really long time. There's different ways about thinking about technology. So there's what we call mechanical technology, which is things like wheels, gears and levers. And then there's things like analog technology, which is something as simple as just using a pen or a paintbrush to express information or share ideas. And digital technologies is basically the use of binary numbers, which is coded in patterns of 0 and 1, 0 and 1. And that coding of numbers just means that information can be converted into a digital form. And when it can be converted in a digital form, it can be shared and spread and stored and re-accessed in different digital devices. And you can see there sort of the range of digital devices that have been around. So in some ways, even though we think that digital technology is really new and that our kids are the first to grow up with digital technology, it's really important to remember that technology itself has been around forever and that every generation experiences a change in technology, and that many digital technologies we ourselves have used in the past for a long time. So we've got some comments here about Snapchat before 12. I've had that conversation in my family, more around screen time, minimising, keeping kids engaged. Trying to see some of the other comments. I'll just put you back so you can see us. So looking at the comments there, educational apps, positive ways for screen time, alternatives to screen time, which is something we'll be looking at this evening. So excellent. So we've got how to grow up, how to raise children in a way so they don't become digital zombies and live in a virtual social network. So we want to think about how we can have children to enjoy nature and people in the here and now, which is certainly a really important aspect of raising children. Now, just got to make sure I get these buttons right. All right, so to kick off, so I'll just switch you back now to the screen. I just wanted to share some views with you, some cartoons with you from the New Yorker about, you know, that sort of expressing this idea that children are actually growing up in a very digital world. So you have to remember that for us, something like a touch screen seems new because it came out in 2010. But if you were born in 2012, or you were born even, you know, last year, it's not new. It's just part of what was in your world. So let's just have a, oh, what have I done? Something dreadful.
All right, I'll hop you back, don't worry.
The screen's back. I pressed the wrong button. All right, here we go. Hang on. Trying to get you to the first cartoon. Here it is. To the first cartoon. Here it is. Okay. So this one here is, obviously you can see the dad's meant to be reading the bedtime story to his son, and then he goes, and then Winnie the Pooh decided that it was time to check Daddy's email again. And so, you know, that whole idea around that it's not just children that are addicted to the screens, but it's also adults. And this is such a powerful interpretation of, you know, there's so much discussion like, oh, children and screen time. But we need to remember how much children are learning by watching adults and adult uses of screens and screen time. So if children are seeing us as adults always wanting to check our emails or look at our screens, then that's what they will see. Oh, Jenny says it's just a blank white screen and you can't see the...
I think Kim's on the way to help, so hang in there, Jenny.
It's really funny. Can everyone else see? Is it just Kim, just Jenny that can't see? Sarah can't see it either. All right, some can.
Yeah,
good.
Here we go.
We'll keep going and we'll sort out those of you that can't see it. It's really funny, so I hope you get to see it soon. All right, we'll go to the next one. I really love this one for the little girls in the middle of the tyre, getting rolled down the hill in the tyre, and she's saying, please, can we go back to playing on our phones? So this one's that whole juxtaposition, that whole notion of, you know, that romantic idea that it's the great, you know, when children are playing outdoors, that was a better type of play, and now all they want to do is be on their phones. And the next one is, there's one more coming. This is my favourite. The dad on the couch having a snooze and he's handing his Fitbit over to his child and he says, "Here, please, go make Daddy's Fitbit think he's exercising." So these are just a way, you know, a way of helping us think about what digital technologies are actually like for children and in families, the sort of representations of digital technology. So now Mel's going to pop a poll up for you so that we can get a little bit of a sense of what it is that most concerns you about digital technology in young children. And we should start to see, as you fill that in, we'll get to see our shared results together. So we'll get a collective understanding. Gracious screen time, straight up there as an issue. And I'll put us back up on the screen. If I do that, I can still see the poll, is that right?
That's right.
There we are. So you can see us responding to your polling as the results come through.
So there's a lot of concerns about screen time, it seems.
So clearly we're going to have to talk about screen time tonight.
And we're getting quite a few things about the type of content children view and play when they're using digital screen time. So there's, I think, some people who would like to know about that as well.
Yeah, so what we should be giving, the sort of content we should be making accessible to children. Not much on sleep. I thought that might get a bit more. All right. So it doesn't look like we're getting much more activity there. So we'll just give you another minute. Is everyone finished? Can you just type in yes if you're done? And if we get a couple of yeses, we'll know. We've got a bad behaviour linked to screen time.
That's through the chat box. Thanks for sharing with that.
Yeah, if you just write yes, then we'll know that you're excellent. Thank you so much. That just helps us get a sense of where you're at as well.
So I've stopped the poll, so you won't be able to add any more responses, but thank you so much for putting your votes in.
Okay, so mostly we're here to talk about screen time, hey? Now, I'll take this off again and we'll go to the next, hopefully. Okay, so here we come now straight to the whole big screen time issues and concerns and discussions which you're interested in learning more about. One of the things I find really interesting in the work that I've done in the area of digital technologies is how much sort of the idea or the concept of screen time captures a lot of media attention. It's something that parents are really sort of interested in knowing more about, and in the early childhood education sector as well, it seems to be something that educators talk about and think about. And the sort of questions that people often ask or want to know about is how much screen time, how often should children have screen time, what about sleep, content, apps, effects on behaviour and screen tantrums. So all of those points there are exactly the things that have been raised in our chat when we asked you this earlier to list the sort of things that you were worried about, and also in the poll we just completed. So what I'm going to do is just very briefly sort of talk through and answer some of those questions, and then after we've looked at those, some of those questions, the answers to those questions, which most of which is based on research that's been coming out in the last couple of years, is then really challenge our ideas to get beyond the notion of screen time as a way of thinking about digital technology in young children's lives. So now someone said, what about background screen time? So I'll try and make sure that we answer that question as well. Whoops, I keep clicking the wrong buttons. Okay, how much screen time comes up as a question a great deal. For babies, so birth to 18 months, the recommendations coming out of America from the American Pediatrics is that we try to limit screen time for this age group as much as we possibly can. But the idea is that video conferencing is okay with young children. And this is because what's really important for babies and toddlers in this age group, yes, the recommendation is based on research for Andrew, The reason that's understood that the video conferencing is okay is that one of the sort of primary tasks for infants and toddlers is to learn all their social cues and to have that, the technical term for this is socially contingent, but another way to think about it is that serve and return interaction. So when a baby makes eye contact with another person or an adult, or smiles or coos or gurgles, that somebody gives that interaction back. And so this is that notion of serving and returning interactions. And when young infants have this sort of experience on video conferencing, then they're still getting those opportunities for serve and return. Now, go to the next one. For older children, about 2 to 5 years, the recommendation is around about 2 hours a day. But what's really interesting about this 2 hours a day is that it's not necessarily that it's 2 hours of screen time per day, but it's more about attending to the fact of how much time the children have been sedentary. So sedentary is sort of like basically their sitting time. So the idea is that if you're thinking about how much time have children had on the screen, we're not going, oh, you've had like 120 minutes, that's it. You might have had to spend some time driving in the car for 40 minutes, and so that can contribute to the up to the 2 hours of sitting still time. I keep pressing the wrong button. On sleep, the research is fairly clear that what we want to do with screens is that screens can impact children's sleep, and it's best to try and avoid screens, particularly in the hour before bedtime in the evenings. And if you have children who are still at napping age, then you want to try and avoid screens. And this is because of the light in the screens actually can prevent the melatonin that helps the children get to sleep. Okay, so we had some questions around content, what type of content, and I think that families are really good at knowing what type of content they want their children to be engaging with. Most families will have a pretty clear sense of what they value and what they believe is important for their young children to learn about and be exposed to. And so the recommendations around content is that, okay, we try and choose things that are age appropriate for our children. We want to be respectful of gender and cultural diversity. And try and have content that's sort of about, showing people being involved in problem solving and solving issues. And we want to avoid content for young children that's repetitive. And we don't want young children seeing really violent content.
I guess here I just want to bring up a question that some people had submitted prior to this webinar, and people were asking, how do you choose good content, good apps or good TV shows or other things like that? Do you have any tips that you can share?
One of the things that I do in my own experience is, especially for my younger children, is I rely a lot on providers that I know.
Okay. Yeah.
Have a good reputation.
Yeah. Okay.
For good content, and so
could you list a few?
Yeah. So in Australia, definitely ABC.
Yeah.
ABC Kids.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the material also through the BBC, which ABC Kids will purchase anyway. Will be there.
Yeah.
And then there's also well-known sort of developers of apps for young children. So companies like Tokaboka or some of those ones that have got a good name in developing the sort of content that's really play-based and active and lets kids explore.
Okay.
So what you want to do is try as much as possible. And it can be hard because children can be attracted to stuff that we don't want them to be attracted to. So you sort of want to try and expose the children, or make sure that you're having the opportunities for them to use those sort of apps that let them role play or solve problems or test out ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, no, there's some good tips there, so I hope that helps people out there as well.
I have got the question from Fiona about the blue light filter. No, actually, I'm sorry, Fiona, I don't know the answer to that question. The nursery rhymes one, I think nursery rhymes are really good, and on YouTube and YouTube Kids,
Yep.
Even if it's, it mightn't necessarily be a BBC or ABC produced nursery rhyme, it could be just some, random person that's created a nursery rhyme slide or whatever.
Yeah.
But because nursery rhymes are so primary for young children's language development, I think that, and often with books and stories and nursery rhymes, we know that children enjoy them in a repetitive way because they're trying to master and engage with the language.
And just take a moment here. I think someone's mentioned, what do you mean by repetitive? If you find a good app, should you not use it a lot?
Oh, so that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by repetitive we mean that the actual app, the actual design of the game or the app has got a repetitive action in that. So there's some concern that some apps for children actually engage them in, that you have to keep chasing the same monster and then you get a reward or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
Because online gambling is a very repetitive experience and you get a reward. So one of the things that we need to look for in apps is it hasn't got that sort of
okay.
Because online gambling is a very repetitive experience and you get a reward. So one of the things that we need to look for in apps is it hasn't got that sort of repetitive activity built into it, but then you get a reward. Because then what that's doing is helping prepare the children to know that that's something that, they will do when they're older.
Yeah.
So that's what we mean by repetitive.
So I guess you're looking for more, games or apps that have a variety of things that the kids can do and, expand their thinking in different types of ways.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Does that make sense to people? Hopefully. Hopefully you're going to go, yes. Content. So we've got, what about apps? That's the other thing. So the apps, so we've just touched on this a little bit. Some things to think about apps is that some of them, when we download them, we know that they're connected to the internet. And, like, for example, if you've got the YouTube app, that, or YouTube Kids, that when you or your children click on it, that it's going to take you to the internet. Other apps look like they're not connected to the internet, but actually many, many apps, and this is something we need to be aware of, are extracting data sort of from the back end and filtering that back to the app company or the app designer. So it might actually be recording information about how long your child's spending on the app, how much time they spend in a particular activity within the app. So that's something to really be aware of, because then what can happen is that data is then used to create different options for your child within the app. Just like when we ourselves go on social media, and if I happen to Google where's my nearest gym at home, because I might get overtaken with the thrill of suddenly getting fit in my 40s, then suddenly in Facebook, then I'll get all of these recommendations for you around the gym or activewear or whatever. So Renee's saying, how can we determine whether the app does that data collection or not? So you know how we always just click past the privacy agreement and we just go, okay, yeah, because they're really long and hard to read. Have a look at those, make sure that we consider those. I think there was something we missed. The other thing is also to consider the pop-ups, or at least teach your children, and even really young children from 2 years old, teach them when a pop-up comes just to click straight in the cross.
Okay.
To get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, and someone's already put this here about pop-ups, is what happens is that the pop-ups come and it's all about purchasing other games.
Yeah.
Or if for some reason your child's managed to get themselves on a site or somewhere where they shouldn't be, the pop-ups can sometimes download viruses.
Okay.
Or, that might give them an option to buy more in-game money or whatever.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, they might have said, someone's going, so some purchased $200 worth of upgrades. So
Sorry that happened to you.
That's not uncommon. So really important from a young age to teach them that the best way to get rid of that, because what the children do is they'll often press the play button. So we did some research with 4-year-olds on their cyber safety and digital safety knowledge, and we showed them like some fake pop-ups and said, what would you do if this came? And most of them say they'll just press that little play thing or the go, because they know that that makes it go away, and they just want it to go away. Right? So they can keep playing. And so what we need to teach them from very early is press the cross, and that's the way to get it to go away.
Even as young as 2, they can
learn that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because you think, when we're crossing the road, we start teaching children road safety, right? We say, stand here, look at the red man, the red lady in the light, and we're going to wait. And then we say, look, it's green now it's our time to go. And we can do exactly the same thing when we're engaging with our children and start teaching them their sort of digital safety from a young age.
That's a fantastic tip, I think.
Yeah, so you just think about it like all the other safe practices that we teach children. So like 2-year-olds, we teach them to put their hats on. We're teaching them from 2 about being sun safe. We're teaching them from 2 about being road safe. We can teach them from that young age as well.
Fantastic.
Where are we up to? I can't believe it's already 8:30.
Yeah.
And we're not nearly through hardly anything. Okay. So we're on, what can you all see? You can see, does it make children fat, lazy and cross? You'll see in a moment as we get through this presentation, there's some different ideas I want to talk to you about how we can think about digital technologies. And I don't think digital technology itself is responsible for making children or people anything.
Okay.
Because we all have decisions to make around how and why we use digital technology. So I think that that's more an issue of making sure that we balance the screen time with non-digital activities, and we'll talk some more about that later. I want to get through some of these. Screen tantrums, I think that one way to think about screen tantrums is that screen tantrums are just tantrums.
Just tantrums, okay.
And there is a certain period of our life, or maybe some of us never grow out of it, where children do have tantrums, and that's because they're wanting to assert their own sort of way of being in the world, and that this is what I'm doing right now, and this is what I'm interested in right now, and they don't want to stop necessarily doing that. So, my toddler will have a tantrum and I say it's time to get off the swing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my toddler will have a tantrum is you have to get out of the bath.
That's right.
It's nothing special.
So it's not necessarily the screen that's causing the tantrum. It's the fact that we're asking them to end an activity that they're enjoying.
Yeah.
And often the reason we're asking them to end an activity that they're enjoying is because we've got other plans for what needs to happen next. So we can get rid of that one. All right, what I want to do now, and we'll just change the view again to keep you stable. Mel and I just clicked that exactly the same time. Is I want to start thinking a little bit beyond screen time and invite you to think about other ways to consider digital technology, and maybe understand about how having different ways to think about digital tech can help you feel a little bit more in charge about how and why you're using digital tech in your family. So bear with me. Where's my slide not changing? Yeah. Here it comes. Okay, bear with me for a little bit while I talk through some of these ideas, and we'll pause and have a little chat about some of them as well. So when I went to university to become a kindergarten teacher, I was taught theories of play, so all about how young children play, and I was taught theories of development, and we used that theoretical knowledge, those ideas and that theory about how children play and learn to teach children. So just like there's theories and ways of understanding how children learn and development, there are also theories and ways to think about digital technology and how people relate to digital technology in their lives. And there's 3 main ways. I'm just getting distracted by the really interesting questions that are coming up, because that poor Bomber's got one of the problems I often have too. We'll come back to that later. So there's three ways of, that we can think about digital technology. So the first one is called technological determinism, and I'm going to explain what all of these words mean. And then the second one is what's called substantive, and then there's one more which is called critical. So first, let's just talk about this one that's up the top, that's called technological determinism. So this way of thinking basically says that technology determines what happens to people when they use it. And this is the viewpoint that, you might see in the television or, splashed across the newspaper. Screens are making kids fat, right? And so it's that sort of idea that the technology is determining the children's weight, right? That technology determines or causes what happens. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got this poor child chained to his screen, and he's not interested in his bike or his soccer ball because the technology is determining these negative outcomes for him. Does that make sense to you all? Just give me a quick indication with some yeses or no, and I'll keep my eye on the chat box. And then the other sort of way of thinking about, excellent, thank you, Alison. The other way of thinking about technological determinism can be a little bit more positive. Excellent, you're all following the logic with me, so that's excellent. The other way of thinking about technological determinism is when governments use technological determinism, for an example, to say a screen for every child. Remember there was some initiative and so we'll give every child in the country a laptop? Yeah. Because that's going to make us the smartest country in the world, right? Okay. So again, it's this notion that technology will determine the outcome. Okay. Technology will make children smart, right? So technological determinism, a real cause and effect way of thinking about technology, yeah? And there can be a negative view of it where you think it's causing bad things for development, or a positive view where you think that technology is fantastic. So that's the first way that we can think about technology. So the next one, this one is called the substantive. So now we're looking at the dude with his coffee. This one's really quite interesting. I might take the slides off so you can, I've lost it. Can you get it off? Oh, there it is. I didn't lose it. I just didn't know where to click. So the next one I want to chat with you about is the one with the coffee, so the substantive way of understanding technology. And what this one says is that when new technologies are invented or come to the market, at first, everyone's noticing it and going, oh my gracious, there's this new technology and everyone's a bit deterministic about it, so it's going to change the world, right? Yeah. So I'm old enough to remember when ATMs came out. Oh, okay. Automatic teller machines. Did that change your life? And it was like everyone was so excited, like, oh my gracious, we can go to the bank whenever we want, and it was a big deal. Or when the very, very first mobile phones came out, and they were great big bricks that people had bags and the tradies used them, and there's lots of discussion about them. And what the substantive view says is that over time, people just get used to those technologies being part of life, and we don't notice them anymore. They sort of sink out of view, right? So what happens then is that because we don't notice them as a big new thing, they're just part of life, is that we develop new social practices around those technologies, or new ways of sort of getting on with each other around those practices. So, for example, I might be at a coffee shop, you and I are having a coffee together, and I've been binge watching Netflix, The Crown on Netflix. Haven't done that. Not that yet. And I'll be like, oh, what year did the Queen get married to Prince Philip? And I won't know, and I'll just pick up my phone and Google it. Yes, I do that all the time. Yeah, we do it all the time. So we don't notice. So the idea of substantive is that we don't notice the technology per se. Okay. But the technology shapes our practices. Yeah. Our social practices, So another one with our children is long car trip, or exactly, I think it was Amanda asked before, about making the phone calls, working from home, my kids crying in the back seat, and I pass back my phone, and away goes on Peppa Pig, peace reigns in the car. Yeah. Okay, so that's a substantive view. I don't necessarily notice the technology, but my social practice for getting peace on a long car trip
Yes.
is to pass back the phone.
Okay,
so that's the
yep.
substantive view, right? So the substantive view is all about social practices.
Yeah, it's just part of our life, and this is how we've incorporated.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Really nice. Okay, are you all following me still? Renee, yes, it does apply to the internet as well. So can I just get some yeses or nos if you're doing okay?
Oh, fantastic. Sounds like
look
people
at that.
are with you.
You've got the substantive theory.
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly, Renee. The internet does change the social practices. So a really beautiful example of technology being substantive is like once when I was growing up, you would arrange a time to meet someone, like for lunch or to go to a movie, and you had to be there on time.
Of course.
Because there was no way to contact them.
Yeah,
but now you know that actually you can leave home sort of right when you're meant to be meeting them, and you'll just send them a text. And you go, on my way.
We're all guilty of that.
We'll do that. And you don't even have to ring them up and face their voice.
I know. Oh, I'm on the way. I'm leaving right now after I...
Correct. Yeah. So that's another way. So the last one that I want to take you to think about is the one that's called critical.
Okay. Critical
theory of technology. Should we take this off a bit because in case people are a bit wobbly with their bandwidth? And this one's my favourite theory or idea or way of thinking about technology, and it's one I sort of want to follow through in the rest of this presentation. So the critical theory of technology says that we should always consider the values that people use to design technology and also the values we as people bring to our use of technology. So this one's about saying technology is never value neutral, right? Sure. So technology will always be designed with a purpose in mind. So maybe someone creates an app and the idea is that they're creating the app because they want an employer to do their data entry faster, right?
Okay, yep.
So the value for the person who creates the app is that they want increased efficiency, right? But then the employer's asked to use the app and they don't want to increase their efficiency. Okay. So the value they bring to the app is that they may not use it or they'll only use it haphazardly, right? Okay. So people actually bring what they think is important to the use of the technology. You've got a pondering face there.
Yeah.
Did you want to ask a question?
Maybe an example can help us, as maybe one that would relate to, I guess, our children maybe.
Okay. So I was going to tell you this one later, but I'll tell it to you now.
Okay, sure.
So here's something that I found out in some research I was doing for a book I was writing on young children and digital technology. And I was using a critical idea of technology to try and understand why children love iPads so much and the development of the technology. The development of the technology. Why? Okay. What was the value? What was the idea and thinking about why that technology was created? Okay. So I went back and I tried to understand where that was coming from. And what I found out was that there was this dude, and he's still alive. His name is Alan Kay, and he was someone that's just interested in everything. But he was actually a technological designer, and in the 1970s he was working on interface design and input devices. So that's basically, like, I don't know if you can see that, like your mouse or how you get the information into the computer.
Okay, like
keyboards or whatever. Yeah. And so touch screens were just sort of emerging as a possibility.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So this was in the distant future where people were like, there's no way you were able to just touch, right? Because everyone...
Of course there's no way.
There was only like a mouse or a keyboard, right?
Okay.
And so he was a really deep reader and a wide reader, and he read all of the major theorists of early childhood. So some of there's like the huge big names in thinking. So he read people like, so these won't necessarily mean much to people, but Piaget, Vygotsky, Bruner, like all the main theorists that when you go to university to be an early childhood educator, you get taught about. And these are the theorists that talk so much about how important it is that children play and experiment and have open opportunities to test things and have social interactions and build their knowledge. themselves. So he read all those ideas, right?
Yeah.
And he came to the conclusion that actually a computer, he called it the ideal form for children to experience all of these ways of learning.
Yeah.
And he created this idea that he called the Dynabook, which was short for dynamic book.
Okay.
Okay? And he drew this little sketch, and basically it had these two kids with this little screen, and they were sitting in a park and they're lying on their tummies and they were playing with these Dynabooks, right? And he said that they'd be connected to a wealth of information, which later became the internet, and that they could touch it and it would have little symbolic icons, because they couldn't read yet, that they could use to manipulate. And then he went, Steve Jobs, Alan Kay went to Apple, and he worked with Steve Jobs.
Oh, okay.
Right? And then he collaborated with Steve Jobs.
Yes.
On what
we know where this is going.
this is going. And after Steve Jobs, like, this is just so interesting to me. Yeah. After Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, he went back to Apple and was like, what can we do next? And Alan Kay said, well, you know, the ideal size of medium would actually be, roughly this big. And so this is an example of that critical theory of technology, is that we have to understand the values that are brought to the design of a technology. Okay. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, now it makes sense.
Then what we do is we go, okay, well, if that's the value that was brought to the design of a technology like the iPad, what's the value that the user brings to it? Okay. And there are many different users of iPads in families. So the value that the 2-year-old brings to using the iPad is not the same as the value that me as a 43-year-old mother is bringing to the iPad.
Yes, okay.
Hence we get tension.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the value that my 2-year-old and my 3-year-old's bringing to the iPad is that it's interactive, it's engaging, he can use it on his own. Yeah. Because Alan Kay used all his developmental theory in designing the Diamond Book to make sure it was like that to him.
Yep, he doesn't need to know how to read quite yet to be able to use it.
Yeah, and he can do it himself, and it's interesting, and it gets a result when he uses it. Yeah. So his value, that my 2-year-old's bringing the value to it, but I might have a different value. Yeah, okay. And then we get tension.
So quickly, Renee's posted a question. So she says, so iPads were invented with children as a target?
No. So they weren't invented with children as a target. They were actually invented for an adult audience. Okay. But a lot of the ideas and thinking that informed why they're so attractive to people were based on theories of early childhood development.
So it's about its usability.
Correct.
It's so easy for
anyone
to use it.
Yeah. So I think that's really... thanks, Renee. I'm glad. Excellent. So how are we going with the critical theory? Just a little sense of that one might be, hopefully that one's not too bad. Good. Jamie's good. Great. Excellent. Excellent. All right, let's get to the next slide.
Well, the next slide is the poll.
The next slide is a quick poll where I want to know, have you ever heard about these 3 ways of thinking about digital tech? So I'm quite interested in this.
So thanks for your responses so far. Excellent. We can see that it's actually quite new to a lot of us today, even to me as well, actually. I've not heard of those.
You haven't heard?
No, I haven't heard of those.
And you know, I hadn't heard of them either. Yeah. And it was only in the last couple of years that I'd started reading about them and thinking about them. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, like parents and educators of young children need to know about these different theories of tech, because what I think is that when we've got a different way to think about tech, we can respond to it differently. So let's just go back to, so pretty much one person had heard of it before.
Smarter than me then.
Smarter than me too.
All right, thanks for your responses. I'm going to close the poll now.
Let's just go back to this one. No, I don't want to go forward, I want to go backwards. Yeah, you're right, Renee, that's a really interesting point. It is other theories came before most of the devices were actually developed. What I think is really important is that when we know that there's different ways to think about digital tech, then we don't have to be stuck on these sort of questions. I want this one. No, where's the one? Sorry.
Do you know what it says? I might be able to pull it up for you.
This one. So, when, we go, oh my gracious, is it the screens that are making my kid lazy, fat or whatever?
Yeah.
We can go, well, if I'm thinking like a technological determinist perspective, I could say yes.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm thinking from a substantive perspective, then I need to think about the social practices around the screen time, right?
Okay.
Or if I'm thinking from a critical perspective, I can think about the values
that
I, as a parent, are bringing to the use of the technology.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's pretty much what you make, it's how you interpret these technologies, I guess, understanding those different theories.
Excellent.
And then applying what your values and your needs and how it applies to you, then you can decide whether or not, will it make my child fat? Will it make my child lazy? Or will it make my child cross? And I guess it's how, as a parent, you determine that for your family.
Exactly. And it puts you back in charge.
Yeah, I think that's great. Good to know. I think it's really empowering to know that we don't have to just go along for the ride.
Yeah.
That we actually have some control about.
I think the other thing that happens is we get swamped by advice.
Okay.
And there'll be so many, and it can be hard to know, well, who do you believe? And everything's changing so fast, and there's so many different sources for content.
Yeah.
And it depends, who you're following on social media, what you're hearing. Because one of the things that we need to be really aware about social media for ourselves is, of course, that the way that the data analytics works is that it narrows our world.
Okay.
So we only get exposed to things that we've already said we liked.
Yes.
It's
an advertising thing, isn't it?
So if you've said that you like the anti-screen time something, then you'll only ever get recommendations and content that are anti-screen time.
Yes, right? I've noticed that within my own screen use.
You would need a critical view on technology
to
understand your own social media experience. All right, how are we going for time? It's not.
Got 10 minutes to go.
Hang on, I'm making you all dizzy too because I've gone too fast. All right, I do want to leave time for some questions. Now I'm just going to talk from a critical perspective.
Okay,
because I think that's the one that's most useful for us.
So understanding the value that we bring to.
Understanding, what it is that we think is important about the digital tech. So the critical perspective, and we've talked about this already, says that what we have to remember is technology doesn't just come from outer space and land in our families. All right? It's not something that's been done to us. Technology is designed and created by people. Comes from humans. And so we've talked about this, that people invest what they know and value. So we've talked about that for the iPad. There's some other examples here. For example, assistive technology. So someone that maybe that person can't see, but they can be using a technology that can describe or convert a picture into a description of something. So people value. What the value that's invested in the design of that technology is helping people. Make sense? Or we have a lot of medical technology now. So, there's an app that if you have a child with ill health or diabetes or whatever, it can record the child's blood glucose levels, and then it sends the details to a parent who might not be with the child. Right?
There's lots of that kind of stuff.
So that those values are about how technology can help people, and then remembering always that the user brings their own values back into that. So we've already covered that. So one of the things that I'm really interested in for educators and for families is that thinking about technology in a more critical way, it takes us out of going it's good or it's bad. You know what I mean? Don't you go, that's good for my kids or that's bad for my kids. And then, so what we do, instead of going about our digital activities.
That's a really good way to think about it, actually.
So we want to think about our digital activities or our digital practices. And we're not just talking about the child's digital activities.
That's a really good way to think about it, actually.
So we want to think about our digital activities or our digital practices. And we're not just talking about the child's digital activities or the child's digital practices. We're talking about our entire families. Because our children are learning about what's appropriate use of digital technologies. Guess who from?
Me.
From us. Okay, so if I'm trying to have a little Facebook social media moment with my cup of tea, and my 2-year-old comes up and wants to engage with me, and I'm really just trying to have that time out, and I sort of am only half paying attention to him while I scroll through the feed, then the digital activity that I'm modelling to him is that you don't have to value the interaction, the human to human react. Yeah, because what I'm choosing to value at the moment is the content.
Yeah, what you see on your
correct.
screen.
I'm not choosing to value the interaction with the child.
Okay.
And I'm actively teaching him by my behaviour that that's okay.
Yeah.
So then later on, when he's happily watching Peppa Pig,
Yeah.
and I want him to listen to me because I'm asking him to hop off and wash his hands for dinner.
Guess what happens?
Yeah. He doesn't think he needs to do that because I didn't model it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is how come we can start talking about digital activities and practices. We've got an agree moment. Yeah, Renee, I agree. We've got an agree moment. Yeah, Renee, I agree with you. It's actually not any different to trying to read a book while your 2-year-old wants you, or I often want to read the newspaper. And that's what a critical perspective can help give us. I can't believe the time's nearly up. I keep crossing off the time on the board in front of me. The critical perspective actually helps us see that it's the interactions, it's what we're valuing and doing around the technology. And remember, a book is still a technology. A book is an analogue technology.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah? The screen is a digital technology.
Yeah, okay.
Oh my gosh,
think of it that way.
I've got to rush. All right, I was meant to leave time for questions. Next screen. All right. So what I'm really trying to help families and educators think about is get your heads out of just always worrying about the screens and screen time.
Yeah, okay.
And that digital technology can be lots of things for children. So it can be coding. Robotics is really interesting for children. Children can print and draw. Printing can be really important. Drawing and painting digitally. Wearables. All of children's popular culture interests and the way that popular culture goes on screen and off screen. So if you've got your, my little boy is loving Octonauts at the moment, and then he can have the Octonauts toys. Or when we're at the park, I always have to be Peso. He's always Captain Barnacles.
Of course.
We've got to put Peso's pretty good. He does have the first aid kit. So then we role play that, right, in the park, or one of his favourite. I think I've shared this with you before.
Yeah.
One of his, because he likes Fireman Sam, and we've got a swimming pool at home. One of his favourite games is, and he loves to play Fireman Sam, which means that I'm trying to hold the noodle. And he loves to play Fireman Sam, which means that I'm trying to hold the noodle against the force of the water. So really encouraging you to think about that it's not just about screens and sitting in front of screens, and how do we extend it, and then if it has been about screen time or consuming media, how do you build on that in other play circumstances at the park or in the swimming pool, so that they're getting the benefit of the language and the conversation and the play as well.
So I guess one of the things I'm getting from this is that use digital technology as a launching pad for other play ideas, whether it be a creative idea, an imaginative idea, or something that you want to explore or your children want to explore. I guess it's a very good source to have these ideas and then take them further.
Yeah. So it's not a sit and serve thing.
No, I think that's the thing we've got to think about.
Or even like little things like at the park, if they're on a swing or they're running or they're learning to skip, you can film it. And then show it to them in slow motion. They love it.
Yeah.
And then they go back and try it again because they're like, oh, I didn't quite get my leg up. And then they go and try it again and you film it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you can time them running and having races.
That's fantastic.
Those sorts of ideas.
There's a lot of different ideas that we can access, I guess, on the internet that, for example, our children might not be exposed to. I guess something I'm thinking about is that, I don't know. Like my daughter doesn't know what a lion really does in the wild, and so we showed her a little video clip, and so she has the opportunity now to pretend play with her toy lion.
Exactly.
How a lion would, act.
Yeah, and that's a really productive use of the screen.
That's great.
Now we're onto our 9 minutes. They've just crossed it off on the board to say that we've had 9 minutes, but the screen here says 8:59, so it's not 9 o'clock. So we're nearly done.
I hope you can bear with us for another moment or so, but if you do have to leave,
you can go. I just want the very last one. Okay, so we were going to have a discussion around the idea of moving beyond screen time, actually not just thinking all the time about the actual, using the screen. Is it helpful for you to think about different ways to use digital technology in your families? So maybe in the last 30 seconds you could just quickly say yes or no for us, and then we'll know if this webinar's been a little bit helpful for how you can think about digital tech with your families.
Thanks for your responses. We can see them coming through. So we had to rush the last bit of it.
It still says 9 p.m, so we're all good.
But I have found it for my own self actually just really beneficial hearing from you about the different concerns, the different theories, and how we can take screen time, as the title suggests, beyond
beyond just the screen.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes, but not enough time. I know, I'm sorry. All right, we do have to sign off now, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. And the next time someone complains to you that screens are making you fat, you can call them a technological determinist.
Thank you, Susie, so much. We very much enjoyed having you here today. And just before we close off, I just want to ask if you could, at the end of this, when we shut this webinar down, you'll actually receive a feedback survey, or you might have actually seen the link in the chat box itself. And we'd really appreciate it if you could take a few moments just to respond. Let us know what you think. It will really help us be able to develop, a better experience, ongoing with these webinars. And I just want to reiterate that if anything from this webinar has concerned you or made you upset, there are places that you can go for a lot of resources, and help is available. So the Raising Children Network website, that's got a lot of information that you can look up. There's Parent Line in your state, which you can call. There's Lifeline, and the number is on your screen. And if you have a particular concern, the Raising Children Network does have a hotlines page, and you can look through that, and maybe you could find an organisation or a hotline that you could call that could help you there. So finally, just letting you know as well, recordings will be, and the handout actually, recordings and the handout will be made available for you next week. And I hope today, you've had a lot to think about. I certainly have. And to sign off, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. And Susie, thank you so much for making the time.
Fun. I'm sorry that we ran out of time to have some more juicy discussions.
Yeah, we could have had a lot more ideas, but oh well, maybe another day.
Another time.
But thank you, everyone, and we'll see you later. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.